The Beast clan had waited 100 years for their treasured daughter to finally hatch from her shell. But the family's long-awaited darling turned out to be the little princess who had just been killed by her own brother in the human world. Because of her snow-white hair, the Emperor had poured all his love onto her. Her brother, who had golden hair instead, never received a shred of his attention. Time and again, she heard the Emperor sigh that he wished she had been born a son. It was only then that her brother finally understood. Their father simply despised him. So on a dark, windy night, he killed their father with his own hands and seized the throne. Those cold, shadowed eyes pierced straight through Enel's heart. She had never seen her brother look so terrifying before. Hadn't their father always loved him best? Go join him down there. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to see you. Enel could never have imagined that the brother who had once been gentle and kind could kill their father, and then his own sister as well. She crawled toward Glitz, trembling, desperate to stir some trace of their old sibling bond. But he only kicked her aside, and the humiliation of it nearly killed her. Those two short words pierced her heart, reflected in her disbelieving eyes. Glitz's longsword finally fell, and with it came the final moment of her life. She still couldn't understand why her brother had turned so cruel. In her hazy half-consciousness, she felt a flicker of light. Was this hell? Before she could even react, the sound of an eggshell cracking rang out, and the faces staring back at her were utterly unfamiliar. She wanted to scream in fear, but all that came out was a helpless little yelp. Wait, soft little paws, a fluffy tail, this was a fox. She had been reborn as a fox. In that instant, Enel felt as though she'd been struck by lightning. She never imagined that opening her eyes again would mean waking up as an entirely different species. It was hard to accept, but a month had already passed, and she was still very much a fox. Fortunately, this time she had a happy family. Her father was Rano, a divine silver fox beast with tremendous power. Her mother was a stunning beauty as well. Both of them doted on her endlessly. Whenever she seemed bored, they'd take her out to play hide-and-seek across the beast forest. Whenever she felt hungry, they'd instantly bring out a mountain of sweet, delicious fruit. This life was even better than being an immortal. But one day, she overheard news that left her utterly stunned. Glitz was spreading rumors throughout the Empire, claiming that she was the one who had killed the Emperor, and that she had taken her own life out of guilt. It was a complete twisting of the truth. Enel was so furious that tears streamed down her face. She never expected Glitz could be so vicious. Framed for their father's murder, the more she thought about it, the more wronged she felt. Finally, exhausted from crying, she fell asleep. When she woke the next day, she had finally calmed down. She had to find a way to reveal the truth to everyone. As it happened, Rana was about to travel to the human world for business. Enel's eyes lit up at once. Here was her chance. She could follow Rano out of the beast forest. This continent had once been ruled together by 6 great divine beasts: the golden lion, the silver fox, the azure whale, the crimson orchid, the white eagle, and the blue serpent. The 6 great beasts governed it side by side. They had inherited divine power and could communicate with spirits. But one day, a great catastrophe struck without warning. The beasts had to pour every ounce of their strength just to hold this continent together. In the end, they withdrew into the beast forest and stopped interfering in the affairs of humankind. Now that her chance had finally come, Enel excitedly clung to Rano's leg. "Daddy, take me with you." She couldn't speak yet, so all she could do was rub anxiously against his pant leg. She'd been alive for quite a while now and still hadn't learned to talk. Even she found that a bit embarrassing. Under the spell of her adorable pleading, Rano finally agreed to bring her along. Enel was so thrilled she nearly leapt into the air. She had to find out exactly what nonsense Glitz was spreading in the Empire. The Beast clan had waited 100 years and at last welcomed a soft, adorable little fox cub. But no one imagined that the treasure they'd longed for was the very princess who had just been erased by her own brother in the human world. It took over a month before Enel could accept that she had been reborn as the little fox Lusa. But she never expected that her brother Glitz was now brazenly slandering her back in the Empire, claiming that she was the true culprit behind the Emperor's murder. A scholar may die, but never be humiliated. This slander was unforgivable. She had to go to the human world and find out exactly what was happening. Her beautiful mother's eyes were filled with worry. Lusa is still so small. She can't even talk yet. What if something dangerous happens to her there? Her handsome father shot back a sharp look. "Don't you know your husband's power by now? And so the little fox was packed up and successfully smuggled out of the house. But the moment they arrived in the human world, the little cub felt dizzy. At the city gates, a huge crowd came rushing out. The instant they saw Rano, everyone dropped to their knees at once, chanting in unison. "Welcome home, Grand Duke of Holland," Lusa quietly swallowed hard. She had long heard that the mysterious, unpredictable Grand Duke of Holland possessed unrivaled swordsmanship and had guarded the northern border for years. Thanks to him, the Empire had enjoyed long-lasting peace. She never imagined that this man was actually her adoptive father. The first thing Rano had to do upon arriving in the human world was tackle a mountain of paperwork. With no other choice, he had to set Lusa aside for a moment. The atmosphere had been calm until Steward Aiden suddenly spoke up. He reported that the barbarians from the north had recently crossed the ice wall and launched a raid. Rano's expression darkened instantly. Cowards, always striking the moment someone lets their guard down. The little fox beside him trembled all over, terrified by his sudden shift in mood. Was this really her adoptive father? Realizing he had frightened his daughter, Rano's expression softened at once. He turned and carried Lusa off to her room. "Be a good girl and go to sleep. I'll come to you as soon as I finish my work." No sooner had Rano stepped out than a strange man appeared in the room behind him. The moment Lusa spotted the glittering golden necklace, she recognized him instantly. He was one of the Empire's mages. Why would a mage suddenly show up here? What shocked Lusa even more was that, without a word, the man reached out and grabbed her by the tail. Then he lifted her whole body up. What is this useless little thing? Furious, Lusa flailed her short little legs without pause. Did this man have absolutely no sense of personal boundaries? She was a girl after all, but before she could even struggle for 2 more seconds, a sudden thud rang out, and the air went dead silent. Mortified, Lusa clapped her paws over her face, wishing she could disappear from embarrassment. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself kidnapped and carried off to the Mage Tower. Thankfully, the man didn't mistreat her. Instead, he brought out a huge plate of sweet, fragrant fruit. For the sake of the food, she decided to forgive this rude man for now. Lusa happily patted her round little belly, but the man only let out a blunt remark. "Truly useless," he said. Just as Lusa was about to bite him out of spite, a respectful voice rang out from outside, calling for Belmond. A visitor from Rosier insists on meeting the master of the Mage Tower. Wait, this young man is actually the master of the Mage Tower? And what shocked her even more was that they wanted to uncover the truth behind the late Emperor's death. That meant someone out there believed she wasn't the killer. If that group could uncover the truth, her name could finally be cleared. With that thought, she clamped down on Belmond's sleeve, hoping the man would take her along. But instead, she was carelessly locked in a room, with no way out. It seemed the only option left was the window. Looking down from the towering mage spire hundreds of meters up, Lusa felt a flicker of fear. If she jumped from here, would she end up flattened into a fox-shaped pancake? Because of her hair, white streaked with pink, the little princess who had been cherished above all else was struck down without mercy by her own brother. No one expected she would be reborn as an adorable little beast, nor that she would unexpectedly gain a doting father and an arrogant older brother. But she never imagined that her very first meeting with that brother would be such a terrifying kidnapping. At that moment, Lusa was busy plotting her escape from her brother's mage tower. She crept trembling to the edge of the windowsill. Jumping from a height like this would surely turn her into a pile of dust. Just as she braced herself to leap, a thread of blue silk suddenly wrapped tightly around her. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself gently cradled in Belmond's arms. Before she could even react, she saw a long sword pointed straight at Belmond's throat. And the one holding the sword was none other than her own father. "If you're going to carry my daughter off, the least you could do is tell me first. I nearly destroyed your mage tower." No sooner had he finished than Belmond replied, calm as ever. "Isn't it perfectly normal for a brother to take his sister out for some fun?" Lusa froze completely. Brother? Was the master of this mage tower actually her beastkin older brother? Looking more closely now, he really did resemble both her father and mother. To teach Belmond a lesson he wouldn't forget, Rano dragged him straight onto the battlefield. By the time the two of them returned late that night, Belmond was so exhausted he could barely stand. This was blatant exploitation of labor. Seeing Belmond's miserable state, Rano generously pushed Lusa toward him. "Sweetheart, go comfort your brother. It seems you two still haven't properly introduced yourselves. Taking the hint, Lusa gently rubbed her little paws against Belmond. Her soft, adorable appearance finally snapped the shaken man back to himself. Seeing how small Lusa was, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of concern. My sister looks like she's only about a week old. Isn't it dangerous to bring her out into the world so soon? That comment made Lusa's mouth twitch. She had already been alive for a whole month, thank you very much. She just happened to look smaller than most other beasts. Rano gently stroked her head. All the more reason we need to take extra care of her. The two of them then began chatting idly. Belmond mentioned that Palin seemed to have lost his mind. He had staked his own reputation on clearing the princess's name. At the sound of that name, Lusa's eyes lit up at once. Palin had once served as her personal guard for a full year. With his talent, he should have had a far brighter future ahead of him. It was only because she had been so favored back then that he'd been assigned to guard her. Lusa had always felt guilty about it. She had tried to show him more care, but the man never once responded in kind. After a year of maintaining that stiff master and guard relationship, Palin resigned and requested a transfer to the front lines. From then on, the two of them never met again. Later, Palin earned countless victories and eventually rose to become captain of the Sacred Order of Knights. Through it all, Lusa had always assumed that Palin despised her. But now Belmond was saying that Palin had staked his own honor to demand the Mage Tower investigate the truth behind the Emperor's death. All to clear the princess's name, and it left Lusa utterly bewildered. Why would Palin do something like that? What Lusa didn't know was that everything Palin had achieved, he owed entirely to her encouragement back then. She had once, full of spirit and charm, told him he was destined to become the finest knight of all. From that moment on, Lusa had found her way into Palin's heart. And now he was clearly prepared to risk his entire honor to clear her name. Out of respect for Palin, Belmond finally decided he would step in personally. What surprised him even more was that the crown prince had also invited Rano to the palace. The moment Lusa heard this, she perked right up. It seemed her chance had finally arrived. No one could believe that a little silver fox not even a month old could unleash such astonishing divine power. Everyone present was left in complete shock. With just a flicker of thought, the little cub sent a scalding bowl of soup flying through the air. It all started the day before, when Rano received an invitation from the crown prince to discuss matters at the palace. But before he could leave, he first had to clear the mountain of paperwork piling up. Poor Lusa was left with no choice but to sit through the work session with her father. But after a full 9 hours, the stack of documents was still enormous. Restless and unable to sit still any longer, Lusa decided to launch her own solo expedition through the Duke's estate. Following her instincts as a natural glutton, she found her way straight to the kitchen. The maids had already been warned by Rano that Lusa was the apple of their master's eye. So everyone eagerly rushed out to serve her every delicious dish imaginable. Seeing a whole mountain of food before her, Lusa's eyes sparkled with delight, and she plopped herself right onto the table to devour it all. Her adorable appearance had the chef so mesmerized he couldn't look away, which was exactly how he accidentally bumped into one of the maids. A bowl of soup at nearly boiling temperature came crashing straight toward Lusa with no warning at all. Chaos erupted instantly, and Lusa's eyes went wide with terror. That's it, she thought. Am I about to become a cooked fox? Suddenly, a familiar melody rang out. In the very next instant, an invisible shield wrapped itself around Lusa, and the scalding soup spilled off harmlessly to the side. To the maids watching, it looked as if a sudden gust of wind had simply blown the bowl away. The strange scene left Lusa completely baffled. She couldn't even turn into a human yet, so how could she possibly be wielding divine power? What on earth was that familiar melody? It seemed there was some hidden secret buried somewhere within her. The day for Rano's palace visit arrived quickly. Afraid her father wouldn't let her come along, Lusa quietly tugged at the hem of his cloak. But her brother showed her no mercy and gave her away instantly. Are you planning to bring your sister to the palace? In that moment, all Lusa wanted was to skewer Belmond on the spot. Luckily, Rano was hopelessly doting when it came to his daughter. If my little treasure wants to come along, then bring her along. To avoid drawing attention before they left, he made sure to ask Belmond to cast a spell to turn her into a human. But since she was still so small, the best he could manage was to turn her into a newborn baby. Looking at her tiny, soft hands, Lusa was certain that she could finally speak. But all that came out was a garbled "Abba, Abba." In that moment, she was utterly crushed. The two grown men beside her immediately started fighting over her attention. Ah, look, the baby just said Dada. Nonsense, she clearly said Big Brother. Weren't beasts supposed to be cold and detached? All Lusa wanted to do was scream, "Stop arguing already, I wasn't calling for anyone." As the group approached the palace, the scene was clearly a familiar one to the others. But for Lusa, it stirred nothing but a quiet wave of melancholy. She never imagined that so much could change in just a single year. Since Rano had to attend to state affairs, he left Lusa in Bellman's care. This made Lusa so furious she flailed her tiny fists in protest. If they were meeting the crown prince, she should get to come too. She was already prepared to give him a piece of her mind. Too bad she still couldn't speak. In the end, all she could do was silently watch Rano walk away. Wanting to console her, Bellman went out to the garden and picked a rare crimson rose native to the north. But it did nothing to lift her spirits. Then, without warning, Bellman cast an invisibility spell and carried her off toward the princess's palace chambers. It was then that Lusa suddenly recalled Fifianchi had entrusted Belmond with investigating the truth behind the emperor's death. But when they arrived at the palace, the scene inside left them both stunned. They found Crown Prince Fifianchi arrogantly scolding a maid for fumbling with the tea service. She couldn't even manage to pour a single cup of tea properly. Didn't the princess ever teach you anything? If she failed to teach you, then I'll simply have to discipline you myself. With that, he had the maid dragged outside. Beside him, Lusa was so furious tears welled up in her eyes. Having lost her mother right after birth, the emperor had kept her from meeting anyone at all, wanting only to protect her. Through those lonely days, it was Marian and the others who had brought warmth into her life. They had become as close to her as family. She couldn't stand by and watch Marian get hurt. She wanted desperately to scream at the cruel people to stop. But right at that moment, the mysterious melody rang out once again. The little fox spirit beast had used her divine power for the very first time, and it left everyone present utterly stunned. The instant the cub let out a cry, the clear sky above suddenly turned black with storm clouds, and thunder began to roll. In the next breath, rain came pouring down over the entire palace. Startled, the crown prince reluctantly retreated indoors. He left Marian collapsed, unconscious, sprawled out on the ground. At that, Lusa could no longer hold herself back. Ignoring the fact that she'd reverted to her true form, she rushed desperately toward Marian. She clamped her teeth onto the girl's clothing, trying with all her strength to drag her somewhere warm. But no matter how hard she tried, Marian wouldn't budge. Tears welled up as the little cub helplessly pressed her paws against Marian's body. Suddenly, a cloak was draped over Lusa. It was Palin again. Why would this man suddenly appear here? He used a spell to send Marian off for treatment, then tenderly gathered Lusa into his arms, wiping away the raindrops clinging to her fur. Once everything had been dealt with, Bellman finally turned to question Palin. How could a knight captain end up in the princess's chambers? What's more, he'd heard that Palin had staked his own honor just to clear the princess's name. At those words, Bellman's emotions flared. Have you lost your mind? Staking your own honor over this? Lusa, who had been eavesdropping the whole time, froze on the spot. Wait, what? Was Palin actually a divine beast too? No wonder her father and brother had seemed so close to him that day. So they were all the same kind after all. The little cub stared at Palin in astonishment. To her surprise, he was already looking right back at her. That burning gaze made Lusa's heart skip nervously. Could he possibly have recognized her true identity as the princess? Fortunately, Bellman stepped in just in time. This is my little sister, Lusa. I'll personally look into what you've told me. With that, he used a spell to leave the scene. After returning to the ducal residence in the capital, Marian, having received treatment, finally woke up. Deeply moved, she told Bellman that the princess had been wronged and that he was the gentlest, kindest person in the world. Those words touched Lusa deeply. She never expected Marian would care about her this much. Meanwhile, Rano also found something rather strange. After meeting with him, the crown prince showed no sign of grief over losing a family member. Instead, he seemed eager to recruit him into his own faction. It was well known that the Holland ducal family had always remained strictly neutral. For the crown prince to know this and still make such a move, there had to be something hidden behind it. It seemed they wouldn't be able to return to the Beast Forest anytime soon. Then let's call Celia over here too. She must miss her family by now. Shikai should be back soon as well. A family should be together. At the mention of this, Bellman's fur instantly bristled. Why would you invite that madman over here? Letting the biggest fool in the world anywhere near my sister? It would leave an irremovable stain on her bright future, no doubt about it. Beside them, Lusa listened without understanding a thing. Who on earth was this madman Belmond kept referring to? And why did just the mention of his name make him so furious? But it wasn't long before she got to meet this legendary figure in person, and the relationship between the two of them left her even more astonished. The man lifted her high into the air, then, like some kind of pervert, pressed his nose right up close. Just as he was about to open his mouth and take a sniff, the little cub thrashed wildly in protest. Was this guy seriously about to take a bite out of her to see how she tasted? But Lusa still couldn't speak. All that came out was a garbled "iya," and strangely, the man reacted as if he'd been struck by lightning. My little sister just called me Big Brother. Belmond, standing right beside them, instantly flared up with jealousy. She was clearly calling for me. And so the two grown men launched straight into a battle over their little sister's affection. By this point, Lusa's head was spinning. She never imagined she'd end up with two older brothers. Her brother Shikai was also the captain of a mercenary company, Kiem Tre. It turned out that just hours earlier, Rano had asked Belmond to take Lusa out for a stroll in town, and everyone assumed it would be nothing more than an ordinary outing. But instead, Belmond had led her to a remote factory, where a red-haired man below was in the middle of a brutal slaughter. The bloody scene terrified Belmond so much that he hastily covered Lusa's eyes. Children shouldn't see this. Once Shikai finished mopping up the fight, he headed alone toward a rundown old house, with Belmond trailing invisibly behind him. No sooner had they reached the door than the red-haired man suddenly launched an attack on Belmond. Fortunately, Belmond reacted quickly, pinning Shikai to the ground with a single leg lock. The instant Shikai saw who it was, his eyes filled with disappointment. It's that idiot Belmond again. But a second later, the sight of adorable little Lusa lit him right back up. What is this? Don't tell me you actually got married? That thoughtless comment made Belmond want to kick him straight out of the building. Oh, so this is my little sister. As Shikai snatched Lusa up, she noticed his hair was the exact same shade as their mother's, and it finally clicked. This man who killed without so much as blinking was actually her second brother. But what she never expected was that Shikai turned out to be even more of a pervert than Belmond, holding her close and pressing his nose right against her. If she hadn't fought back with everything she had, her first kiss on the cheek would surely have been stolen right then. And so, all because of one little comment from the cub, the two grown men ended up brawling inside the abandoned warehouse. Right in the middle of their fierce fight, a high priest suddenly appeared at the door. The atmosphere turned awkward instantly. Once the tension had eased, the high priest finally pulled out a bag of gold coins. It turned out Shikai's earlier killing spree had been a paid commission from the high priest himself to help rescue orphaned children from the hands of human traffickers. It seemed like a righteous transaction, but the ever-sharp Belmond had noticed something suspicious. While observing the fight earlier, he'd spotted a temple pass card in the trafficker's possession. And the design of the brooch pinned to the high priest's robe matched the emblem on that very card. It was clear the high priest had ties to the trafficking ring. This whole scheme with Shikai had likely been set up to destroy some piece of evidence. Realizing he'd been caught, the high priest didn't bother pretending anymore. He simply gave a light wave of his hand. A squad of well-trained holy knights immediately appeared inside the house. Belmond couldn't help feeling a flash of irritation. Their little princess, barely a month old, was already being forced to try on 1,000 different outfits in a single day. The moment the steward called for the 1,001st outfit change, the little princess finally staged a full-on protest strike. Whoever wants to try on more clothes can go right ahead, I'm exhausted. She had assumed her father was throwing this 100-day celebration just for the sake of formality, never expecting it would turn into something this extravagant. It turned out that just one day earlier, the temple's high priest had been running his mouth carelessly. He claimed to have personally seen a divine beast, even though every beast entering the human world was strictly forbidden from revealing their true identity. It was clear someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. To put a stop to the other great family's schemes, Rano decided to throw a full 100-day celebration for Lusa, both to formally introduce his precious daughter to the world and to send a warning to anyone with ill intentions. If you want to cause trouble on Silver Fox territory, you'd better think carefully about how many lives you have to spare. With that thought, he immediately ordered his servants to bring his beloved wife home, while preparing an endless array of gorgeous little dresses. But he never imagined that just before the celebration was set to begin, a maid reported that someone had stolen Celia's ceremonial gown. No one could just let that slide. Aiden, burning with righteous indignation, volunteered at once to go retrieve the stolen gown. But not only did he fail to get it back, he came home afterward and locked himself in his room, utterly dejected. With no other option, it seemed only Rano could handle this personally. He brought Lusa along to Aiden's room, where Aiden sat curled up in a corner, questioning his entire existence. He said that the moment he walked in anywhere, everyone treated him like a monster. Hearing this, Lusa couldn't help but feel a flicker of confusion. Wasn't it strange that people would treat a steward of the ducal household as anything other than perfectly normal? Suddenly, she recalled something Rano had once told her before. Aiden was originally from a border realm, and he was one of the few humans who was allowed to know a beast's true identity. It seemed Aiden was hiding a secret or two of his own. While she was still lost in thought, the group had already arrived outside a clothing boutique. It was the most famous fashion house on the entire continent, where countless nobles came to have their gowns made. What's more, the owner never bowed to reputation or money. He only created when inspiration struck him. Because of this, the great families used the number of capri gowns they owned as a measure of status. That was exactly why the theft of the gown was such a serious matter. A shop employee told them that the gown had already been taken by the crown princess herself. His indifferent tone made it obvious to anyone listening that he was lying. Rano didn't waste words. He sent someone directly to summon the designer. Just then, one of the crown princess's attendants walked in carrying the very gown, asking the owner to have it resized. Rano smiled and stepped forward at once. He had no interest in going to the palace, yet here it was, being delivered right into his hands. But the guard had absolutely no intention of backing down. Her Highness enjoyed wearing this gown very much. Grand Duke, you'd best just let it go. The moment those words left his mouth, Lusa wanted nothing more than to clamp a hand over the man's mouth. Please, just stop talking, she thought. I really don't want to watch my father commit murder in broad daylight. Sure enough, the instant he heard that the gown had already been worn, Rano's expression darkened at once. In the very next moment, he tore the gown to shreds right in front of everyone. If my wife hasn't even worn it yet, then no one else is fit to wear it either. To protect his wife, the fox spirit beast, who was normally as gentle as jade, revealed his ruthless side in the human world for the very first time. A pleasant smile still lingered on his lips, but his hands showed no mercy as he tore the gown apart and casually pressed his aura down on the guard. Standing against the ducal household was certainly not a wise decision. With that, he watched the terrified guard flee. My wife's dignity is something I will protect myself. Beside him, the little fox cub trembled with fear. She knew her father's gentleness was reserved only for family, but she never expected he could be this terrifying. At that moment, the designer Capri also stepped forward. Seeing him bow humbly, Rano immediately turned on the full force of the fox's charm. I'd like to trouble Master Capri to prepare another gown as soon as possible. Here's a blank check. Fill in whatever amount you'd like. When he saw Capri write down too small a figure, he even generously added a few extra zeros himself. Such generosity left everyone watching wide-eyed with astonishment. What extravagance! It really is true, the power of money is a wonderful thing. Just as the group was about to leave, a blonde man suddenly muttered a curse. Monster. Lusa's eyes went wide. Were they insulting Aiden? It seemed this shop really did have poor staff management. Turning around, she found the man still glaring at them, and inwardly, Lusa began to scream with rage. If only her arms and legs were a little longer, she'd march right over there and give him a good punch. No sooner had that thought crossed her mind than the familiar melody rang out once more. In the next instant, the man suddenly toppled forward, face first onto the ground. Every time the cub heard that familiar tune, something extraordinary always seemed to happen. But strangely, neither Rano nor Belmond ever seemed to hear it. It was clear there was some deeper mystery behind all this, but given her current state, there was no way to investigate further. With no other option, she could only wait and see. Meanwhile, there was something else troubling the little cub even more. Ever since returning from the clothing shop, Aiden had sunk into deep sorrow, even crying so hard his face was a mess of tears. He said he wasn't fit to serve as the ducal household steward, that a monster who belonged nowhere like him could never shoulder such a responsibility. These words left Lusa so anxious she nearly blurted something out loud. With great effort, she climbed her short legs up onto the desk, then gently patted Aiden's face to comfort him. Believe in yourself, you're the best there is, the cub said. even generously offering him her own little fox-shaped cookie. If Rano had chosen to keep Aiden by his side, then surely he had something remarkable about him. At the very least, he couldn't possibly be some unforgivable criminal. Trusting in Aiden and warmed by Lusa's comfort, he finally pulled himself back together, brimming with energy once again. Time passed quickly, and soon it was just a few days before the 100-day celebration. After finishing her preparations in the beast forest, Celia performed the ritual of transformation and happily made her way to the human world, emerging in a blaze of fire. Her beauty was beyond words the moment she saw her precious daughter, now in human form. She gently swept Lusa up into her arms. "I finally found you, my darling." Standing beside them, Rano couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. "Don't forget your husband is right here too." The little family of 3 looked warm and happy together. Afterward, the couple began the final preparations for the 100-day celebration. Staring at the mountain of jewelry piled before them, both of them couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. Should she wear this gemstone necklace or this cute little bow? Or maybe both at once? Worn out by their enthusiastic fussing, Lusa eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. Watching Lusa's adorable sleeping face, Celia finally turned to have a serious conversation with Rano. Her expression was filled with worry, her brow furrowed tight. "Rano, our daughter, doesn't seem like an ordinary beast." It had taken the beast couple so much effort to have their little princess. Yet somehow their daughter turned out to be an aberrant, clearly a silver fox, but with ears and a tail the exact same shade of pink as a red wolf. Ordinary beasts only ever inherited traits from one parent, either the father or the mother. If Lusa truly was an aberrant, then they were in serious trouble. At the thought, Celia grew so anxious she nearly burst into tears. But Lusa remained completely oblivious to all of this, sleeping soundly and peacefully. Opening her sleepy eyes, the first thing the little cub saw was Rano's dazzlingly handsome face. "My dad is way too handsome," she thought. At that moment, Bellman also walked in. With just a light wave of his hand, Lusa instantly transformed into an adorable human baby. "The princess's debut celebration is about to begin. Let's head out." The moment the whole family appeared at the entrance, the once noisy hall fell dead silent. No one expected such a dazzling group could exist in this world. Rano had never once appeared in public before, so everyone had assumed he must be hideous. But instead, he turned out to be impossibly handsome. What shocked everyone even more was that Belmond, master of the Mage Tower, and Shikai, captain of the mercenary company, Kayem Tra, had both come as her personal guards. Their presence alone was a clear message to everyone. If you value your life, don't mess with the little Duchess. And what astonished the crowd even further was that the Crown Prince himself had also attended the celebration. After being reborn, only to face the very brother who had once killed her with his own hands, Lusa's heart was consumed with boundless fury. That cruel, merciless man from before, how could he stand here now? Putting on such a modest, courteous act in front of everyone. And what infuriated the little cub even more was that this fiend actually wanted to become her godfather. Anyone with sharp eyes could tell that the Crown Prince's move was clearly an attempt to build a friendly relationship with the ducal household. But deep down, Lusa wanted nothing to do with it. Letting a man who had once killed her raise her? Never. She'd rather die all over again. Fortunately, Rano wasn't someone easily pushed around. With a single line, "The child already has a godfather," he successfully crushed the Crown Prince's scheme. Lusa's heart, which had been hanging by a thread, finally settled back into place. But it wasn't long before she encountered the second person she least wanted to see. It was Crown Princess Fifianchi. Seeing that Celia was merely a commoner by birth, she tried to use her status to humiliate her. But as a divine beast, how could Celia possibly be intimidated by such a petty tactic? No matter what Fifianchi said, Celia remained completely indifferent, seeing that her verbal insults had failed to land. Fifianchi flew into a rage and tried once more, this time attempting to ruin Celia's gown. How could this wicked woman be so vicious? Just as the wine was about to splash onto Celia, Lusa instinctively reached out her hand in alarm. "No one is allowed to bully my mother." In the next instant, the glass of wine that had been meant for Celia suddenly reversed course and splashed directly onto Lusa's face instead, leaving their daughter soaked from head to toe. Celia was heartbroken, and seeing the true culprit still standing there gloating. She finally lost all patience and tore into Fifianchi with a scathing, merciless verbal lashing. Not far off, Rano stepped forward as well. "How dare you cause trouble on my territory? Do you even know who you're dealing with? I'll make sure these ill-mannered families pay the price." Once everything was settled, Celia had Shikai take Lusa back to her room to rest. But they had barely made it halfway there when Lusa's whole body suddenly began to burn up. Her body felt as if it might explode from the discomfort. In the very next moment, a blinding white light burst from her entire body. An 8-month-old human baby, all because of drinking 3 cups of wine, had turned into a small pink fox. This sent her second brother into a panic. If anyone saw this, it would surely cause a huge uproar. And worse still, the eldest brother, the one who knew the transformation spell, had vanished at precisely this moment. To protect his little sister, Shikai had no choice but to hide Lusa out on the balcony. He also warned her sternly not to wander off, then hurried away to find Belmond. Poor little Lusa had no choice but to pull a single leaf over herself for cover. She figured no one would come by at this hour, but to her shock, the Crown Prince suddenly appeared. In an instant, Lusa was overcome with fear, silently praying the man would just leave already. But to her dismay, the Crown Prince suddenly turned his head. The moment their eyes met, Lusa broke into a cold sweat from sheer terror. What was she supposed to do now? Just as the cub had no idea what to do, a familiar voice suddenly echoed in her mind. "Lusa, run now." It even pointed out the direction for her. Seeing the Crown Prince about to catch her, Lusa took a desperate gamble and bolted. Whatever happens, happens, she thought. It's still better than getting caught by him. After running for a long while, an exhausted Lusa finally stopped. Just as she thought the danger had passed, the voice in her head suddenly turned frantic. Disaster's coming. But all she saw was Palin, standing there with a calm expression. Should she risk asking him for help? But he wasn't the type to get tangled up in trouble. Right at that moment, a set of footsteps suddenly approached. Getting caught meant certain doom. Whatever, one more desperate gamble. In an instant, Lusa darted with a quick whoosh straight into the folds of Palin's cloak. At that exact moment, the prince arrived as well. "Has anyone seen a small silver fox around here?" Lusa's heart leapt straight into her throat. Thankfully, Palin didn't give her away. The two of them exchanged polite conversation. Somehow the topic turned to Princess Enel. The detestable prince still kept up his pretense of grief. He claimed that if he hadn't neglected his sister, she never would have fallen into madness. If Lusa hadn't been stuck in her original form, she would have leapt out right then to claw the prince's face apart. She had expected Palin to go along with it, but instead he responded with cool indifference. "I believe the princess was not the kind of person you're describing. As a member of an aberrant species, Palin had been branded a bad omen from the moment he was born. Even though his life had been spared from execution, the elders still forced a collar around his neck. Feeling like he belonged nowhere, he eventually made his way to the human world. It was there that he met the first person who ever gave him warmth. Everyone else called him an ill omen, but Enel had greeted him with a smile as bright as the morning sun. She had confidently told him he would one day become a hero renowned across the entire continent. Spending so much time by her side, he had slowly, quietly fallen in love with her. To hide his stirring heart, Palin had requested to be sent off to fight in the Southern Campaign. But even on the battlefield, thoughts of Enel would drift back to him from time to time. It was only in that moment that he finally understood his own heart, and he rushed to end the war swiftly so he could return to her. But he never imagined that by the time he returned victorious, all that awaited him was the news that Enel had died. Everyone claimed she had murdered her father, an unforgivable act of betrayal, but Palin had always believed without a doubt that she was not that kind of person. Now that the prince had brought up Enel again, Palin still felt that something was deeply wrong. The two of them chatted a while longer before the prince finally took his leave. It was only then that Palin pulled Lusa out. "Don't you know beasts aren't allowed to reveal their identity in front of humans?" Unable to speak, Lusa was caught somewhere between laughter and tears. She had no idea herself why she'd suddenly reverted to her true form. Just as she was struggling to explain, Belmond and Shikai arrived. "Are you the one who's been carrying my sister off from the balcony?" A little silver fox spirit beast with unmatched divine power, yet who couldn't even manage the simplest human transformation spell. Failing to transform into a human put her at serious risk of exposing her identity. To help the cub live more safely in the human world, being of an aberrant species himself, Palin volunteered to personally teach Lusa the transformation spell. He also took the time to explain to Bellman and Shikai that he had absolutely no intention of kidnapping Lusa. The two overprotective brothers were finally reassured, though Bellman still couldn't shake his suspicion over why his sister's spells kept breaking so unexpectedly. Afterward, he relayed the whole matter to Rano, whose expression turned deeply serious. It seemed he needed to pay Muzan a visit. To help his daughter quickly master the transformation spell, Rano decided to set out that very same day. At that moment, Lusa was still trying to learn how to walk. Seeing her father approach, she stumbled excitedly toward him. Afterward, the three of them boarded a carriage and headed for the palace. Such an ostentatious display made Lusa's mouth twitch. Was Dad doing this on purpose? Only 2 days after stirring up trouble with the royal family, here he was making another grand entrance to visit the captain of the Sacred Order of Knights. It seemed her father was determined to grab the attention of the political world. It took a long while to reach the papal hall, but the guard on duty said Palin wasn't there. Rano's eyes were full of suspicion. "Look me in the eye and tell me whether you believe that or not." Just then, a chibi version of Palin suddenly appeared before them all. He introduced himself as Palin's cousin, Tulan. Both Rano and Shikai's minds went completely blank. Wasn't this literally Palin himself? Just as Shikai opened his mouth to call him out, Rano punched him quiet. "May we wait here for the captain to return?" Under Tulan's guidance, the group finally arrived at a room. They had assumed the transformation method would be taught in front of everyone, but to their surprise, Tulan insisted on speaking with Lusa alone. Left with no choice, Rano and Shikai had to step out of the room. Once only Lusa and the boy remained inside. He finally asked the question that had been on his mind for a while. "Can you transform back into your original form on your own?" Lusa shook her head sadly. After hearing her answer, the boy pressed his finger directly against her forehead and murmured a spell she couldn't understand. A few seconds later, Tulan finally spoke. "You truly are a special existence, which means you're going to bring disaster. A beast is only born when a fractured soul enters the body of an animal. But some beasts are born with a naturally larger fragment of soul than others. These beasts are what we call special existences. Once a special existence loses control of their overwhelming divine power, it triggers catastrophe." Hearing this explanation left Lusa completely stunned. Could she really be some kind of cursed symbol? To help Lusa understand better, Tulan carried her outside. His hand gently brushed past her eyes. A miraculous scene unfolded before her. The once quiet garden suddenly filled with countless pink spirits. They fluttered and chirped playfully through the air. It was only then that Lusa finally understood. It turned out that every time she'd faced danger, it was these little spirits who had come to her aid. Even her reincarnation itself had been no exception. And these spirits seemed to adore Lusa deeply. They all competed for the chance to get close to her. If she ever stumbled and started to fall, they would band together to catch her. Just as they were all enjoying themselves, Palin suddenly scooped Lusa up. "His Holiness the Pope has arrived." "It's best you don't run into him." The other little spirits grew restless at once. "That man is definitely bad news. We have to protect Lusa." In an instant, thunder rumbled across the entire sky. More and more spirits began gathering. A massive surge of power immediately engulfed the entire papal hall. The little silver fox had taken a full 84 days just to hatch from her egg, only to become a star of misfortune, shunned by everyone, simply because she was born with supreme divine power. A power that threatened to bring disaster upon all the beasts. And in that moment, Lusa truly felt for herself just how terrifying that energy really was. The spirits, wielding immense power in their desire to protect her, seemed ready to tear the entire papal hall apart. And she, as the one those spirits belonged to, had absolutely no control over them at all. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Palin used his own power to block the spirits' attack entirely. Lusa, who had been tense with fear, finally let out a sigh of relief. But in the very next instant, Palin collapsed to the ground in agony, for a curse had long ago been placed on him by the elders. Because of it, whenever he used the power of a special existence, he would be plunged into unbearable pain. Seeing the marks growing more numerous across Palin's neck, Lusa couldn't hold back and rushed forward to stop it. But she was blocked by his own spirits. Her tiny hand left helplessly frozen in midair. What can I do to ease his pain, she wondered. With that thought, a blinding white light suddenly burst from her entire body. In the next instant, though she was still just an infant, Palin saw the reflection of Enel in her place, his eyes filled with utter disbelief. "Princess Enel," he murmured, and then both he and Lusa collapsed at the same time. At that moment, Rano and Shikai came rushing in as well. Worried, he scooped Lusa into his arms. Could it really be that they'd have to resort to that method after all? After this whole incident, the way Rano and everyone else treated Lusa shifted in a subtle but noticeable way. They could hardly bear to let her out of their sight all day. This was a kind of family closeness Lusa had never truly felt before. Even though each day passed happily, she still carried a quiet worry that if she ever failed to control the spirit's power, she would surely end up sharing the same fate as Palin. On top of that, there was something else Lusa couldn't understand. Why did Tulan call her Your Highness the Princess? They had never even met before, and even setting that aside, their appearances were completely different. It just didn't add up. Too many mysteries left Lusa troubled, so much so that all she could do was sigh all day long. Seeing this, Shikai felt genuinely heartbroken. "Isn't my sister happy?" Just as he was about to comfort Lusa, Belmond, who had been out working, suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, he scooped Lusa into his arms, spun around, leapt into the air, and landed with a perfect roll. "Sister, I'm taking you on a picnic. Books say that getting outdoors is great for an infant's brain development, and I've already found the most popular picnic spot around." Excited, Shikai immediately went to prepare food. "Enough for 3 days, is that enough?" Belmond, wearing a deep, thoughtful expression, added, "Let me go prepare the sofa chairs." Watching all this, Lusa nearly dropped her jaw in astonishment. Did they really need to go this overboard? After a series of trial and error, the group finally set off. Once they arrived at the park, Lusa was thrilled beyond words. After greeting her 2 brothers, she wandered off on her own to explore. It had been so long since she'd experienced this kind of lively bustle. She happily took in the sights all around until she accidentally bumped into a blonde-haired boy. She tumbled straight to the ground, and the boy politely reached out a hand to help her up. "Sorry, are you all right?" Lusa gently shook her head no. The boy's heart suddenly started racing at 180 beats a minute, and he excitedly grabbed hold of Lusa's hands. "Please marry me," he said. A 2-year-old, out in public for the very first time, had just received a passionate marriage proposal from a total stranger, who then insisted on dragging her off to meet his parents. By the time the 2 families finally sat down together, Lusa still found the whole thing hard to believe. To propose marriage under the combined pressure of both Belmond and Shikai, this boy was clearly destined for great things later in life. Meanwhile, to win her favor, the boy pulled out an endless supply of delicious snacks. He even fed her by hand. In that moment, Lusa felt a sense of ease she had never experienced before. So this was what having a friend felt like. Wonderful beyond words. Just as they were happily enjoying their picnic, someone suddenly kicked sand straight into their food. The boy beside them wore a sly, mocking expression. "You low-born commoners don't deserve to show off like this." Seeing the boy grow more arrogant by the second, Lusa couldn't hold back any longer. "Apologize to me right now." But instead of showing any remorse, the boy grew even more insolent, sneering that she shouldn't be hanging around with some poor, penniless child. Lusa was stunned. Was that really something a child his age should be saying? Turning around, she saw Shikai already reaching for a bottle of liquor, and Lusa, fur bristling, flinched in alarm. She rushed over and begged Shikai to hold her instead. She didn't want to cause a scene at the park. But the boy, oblivious to the danger, kept pushing his provocations further. This completely set off Belmond and Shikai, who were now fully prepared to teach the boy a lesson. Eric, flustered, hurriedly spoke up to warn them. These people belonged to a high-ranking noble family. Powerful, dangerous people not to be crossed lightly. But no sooner had he finished than the boy's mother came storming over, hurling insults, ready to demand an explanation. But the instant her eyes landed on Lusa, she froze completely. Only the royal family outranked the Bihawan family in nobility, and so they had no choice but to apologize. Eric, however, looked utterly heartbroken, having wanted so badly to treat Lusa to more delicious food. Understanding, Lusa stepped forward to comfort him, telling him they could still play together another time. At that, a smile finally spread across Eric's face, and since Lusa's coming-of-age ceremony was about to begin, they had to say their goodbyes. Afterward, the whole family returned to the beast forest, for in order to become a true divine beast, one had to undergo the baptism at the Lake of Life, Hioka. It was Lusa's very first time there, and she was overflowing with excitement, but the bracelet on her wrist was starting to bother her. "Why did Mom insist I wear this thing?" What Lusa didn't know was that, to keep the other beasts from discovering her true identity as an aberrant species, Rano had specifically sought out Muzan to obtain a bracelet capable of masking the aura of an aberrant. He didn't want his beloved daughter to suffer the same pain that Palin had endured. Suddenly, ripples spread across the lake's surface, and countless beasts descended from the sky above. They had all come, for the little silver fox beast was about to hold her very first coming-of-age ceremony. It left everyone completely stunned. The moment the little cub's foot touched the surface of the lake, the entire water instantly glowed with a soft pink light. In the next instant, a 9-tailed pink fox spirit appeared upon the water's surface, and this, it turned out, was what she would look like once fully grown. The strange sight left Lusa trembling from head to tail. Even a powerful beast like Rano only had a single tail. And yet somehow she had 9. Thankfully, this reflected vision was visible only to her. Otherwise, there would be no way to hide the fact that she was an aberrant. But before she even had a chance to catch her breath, her whole body was suddenly pulled into the lake. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in an entirely different space, and just as she was about to look around, a tremendous explosion suddenly shook heaven and earth, and the ground beneath her feet split open at once. Then 6 pillars of light burst forth from the earth, shooting straight up into the sky. The breathtaking sight left Lusa staring in awe. These, it turned out, were the pillars of light representing the 6 great divine beasts. By all rights, once this display was over, the coming-of-age ceremony should have come to an end. But suddenly a chorus of murmuring voices rang out in her ears. Lusa was baffled. She'd never once heard of pillars of light being able to talk. The moment those words left her, the murmuring voices abruptly fell silent. Then came shocked, disbelieving cries. This little silver fox can actually hear us? What a strange beast indeed. It was then that they noticed the bracelet on Lusa's wrist. The pillars of light flared with anger. In the very next instant, the once unbreakable bracelet suddenly shattered into pieces. One of the pillars of light seized the moment to strike Lusa down to the ground. So it turns out you're the aberrant that will bring disaster upon us all. You should simply cease to exist. In that moment, Lusa felt an overwhelming wave of injustice. She had clearly done nothing wrong, yet the pillars of light insisted she would bring calamity. Once, there had been an aberrant who turned the entire world into a living hell. Countless people were scattered, dying miserable deaths in the streets. Because of that, they could not afford to overlook even the slightest potential threat. Terrified, Lusa clenched her tiny hands tight. Was her own death really the only way to buy peace for the world? Right at that moment, countless spirits burst through a rift in space and time, rushing forward. Lusa, don't be afraid, we're here to protect you. Startled, the pillars of light exclaimed, how could an aberrant be so beloved by the spirits? A fierce argument broke out among them at once. Though Lusa was indeed an aberrant, her situation was entirely different from Palin's. In the end, they decided to read Lusa's soul. But to their shock, her soul appeared tangled and overlapping, so much so that nothing could be clearly seen at all. Could it be that Lusa possessed more than one soul? And so they asked Lusa to state every name she had ever gone by. Lusa had no choice but to tell them, in this life, my name is Lusa. And in my previous life, I was Enel. The moment those words left her, every pillar of light erupted at once. This little one is none other than the princess of the Roshi Empire. Could this be fate's own guiding hand? The spirits spoke up as well at that moment, declaring that they would protect Lusa forever. Seeing this, the pillars of light finally relented. Spirits of light only ever follow souls that are kind and righteous. Perhaps they could redeem even a soul that had strayed into darkness. Little beast, we will grant you one chance. Whether the future brings an age of prosperity or leads to utter ruin, it all rests upon you. With that, they flung Lusa back out. Poor Lusa still hadn't fully grasped what had just happened. What exactly had that all been about? The beast couple had gone through so much difficulty just to have their little princess. Yet somehow, their daughter turned out to be a frail, tiny little thing. Even though she was clearly already 3 years old, she was still as scrawny as a newborn. Everyone that day had assumed the little cub was a lost cause. But no one could have guessed she actually possessed power capable of destroying heaven and earth. She was also the very first to ever turn the Lake of Life pink. Everyone watching couldn't help but marvel at this miraculous sight. Rano let out a sigh of relief, though deep down he was still shaken with fear. Thankfully, he had put the restraint charm on Lusa beforehand. Otherwise, there would have been no way to hide her identity as an aberrant. Years earlier, when Palin had undergone his own coming-of-age ceremony, a black pillar of light had risen from the lake, and he had come within a hair's breadth of being executed. Something like that could absolutely never be allowed to happen to their little one. Just then, Celia rushed over, her face etched with worry. It's been so long. Why isn't our little one back yet? Could something have happened to her? Right at that moment, several marigold petals came drifting across the water's surface. Rano's pupils suddenly contracted. That damn serpent has shown up again. With that, the group immediately set off in search of their daughter. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, standing before Lusa was none other than the serpent man, Basira. The man silently stepped toward her, then held out a marigold flower, calling it a gift to mark their first meeting. But Marian had once told her that marigolds were used specifically to ward off snakes. As a plant despised most by the Blue Serpent clan, Lusa wanted to flee in terror, but her body wouldn't move at all. This was the very mind control technique the Blue Serpent clan was known for mastering. Worse still, the man seemed to have already realized she was an aberrant. Just as he was about to make his next move, Belmond and Shikai descended from above, radiating pure killing intent. Shikai charged in like a whirlwind, slamming Basira face first into the ground with such force that the entire forest trembled. But the man pinned beneath his foot showed not the slightest fear, mocking them and claiming he had merely brought a gift. At that moment, Rano and the others arrived as well. Seeing them, Basira rose casually to his feet, then, with a tone dripping with mock regret, said he had missed Rano terribly. He went on to say that before, only he, Rano, and Belmond, as members of aberrant species, had ever been able to turn the lake's waters a different color. Enraged, Rano teleported in the blink of an eye and seized Basira by the throat. You have no right to speak of my family. Rano had only meant to give him a warning, but the man, acting like a lunatic, grabbed hold of Rano's arm instead. Go ahead, kill me, he said. That way you and your family can finally have real peace of mind. Those calm, deliberate words filled Rano with boundless fury. No, if Basira's soul weren't linked to the others. Killing him would mean killing the others too. Otherwise, Rano would surely have carved him into 100 pieces already. At that moment, the other elders arrived as well, and only then did Rano finally throw Basira aside. Still, he made sure to warn the man, do this again, and I'll chop you into pieces. With that, he carried Lusa back to the ducal residence. To keep this from happening again, Rano warned Lusa that she absolutely needed to stay wary of that madman Basira. What shocked Lusa was that Basira turned out to be an old friend of Rano's. Back when they were young, both he and Basira had belonged to the same generation, but out of all the respected members of their clan, the Blue Serpent clan chose only Basira to become an elder, and from that point forward, the entire Council of Elders began revolving around him. Somehow, without anyone quite realizing it, he had become the king of all the beasts. And all of this change had only begun after the first aberrant ever appeared. From that point on, the Council of Elders grew corrupt, and Rano ended up resigning from his position as elder because of it. The way Basira was now taking such an interest in Lusa was probably connected to her identity as an aberrant. Hearing all this, Lusa's ears drooped. She never imagined she might end up dragging her family into trouble. At that, Shikai stood up in anger, regretting that he hadn't killed Basira back then. At that moment, Rano lifted Lusa high into the air, a gesture showing that they would protect her forever. Looking at the gentle yet resolute expressions of her family, Lusa silently made a vow to herself that she would grow strong enough no matter what to protect everyone she loved. The little silver fox beast simply announced that from now on she would sleep alone. To everyone's surprise, her usually cold and detached adoptive father was so heartbroken he could barely contain himself. To make up for this disappointment, Lusa agreed to go out into town with Rano. She even let him treat her to a full day of pampering and dress up. Before long, the two of them settled into a leisurely afternoon tea. An uninvited guest soon joined them, her brother Belmond, who used the excuse that Lusa still hadn't mastered turning into a human, and insisted on tagging along. Sensing the moment was right, her adoptive father asked a rather pointed question. Would it really be all right to have Lusa's birthday party be family only? Shouldn't we invite some friends along as well? This was clearly a not-so-subtle hint aimed at Palin and Tiu Lan. Guided by Rano, Lusa sincerely sent out invitations to both of them. She also made sure to set one aside specially for Aiden, someone who felt as though he were worlds away, yet always right there before her eyes. All that was left now was to wait and see which identity he would choose to show up as. Time flew by, and before long, the day of the birthday party had arrived. Yet by noon, Lusa still refused to leave. She stubbornly kept waiting, hoping one of the two would show up. Her family had no choice but to stand there and wait along with her, but they couldn't keep waiting like this forever. Her mother finally stepped in to gently persuade her, "Their positions are quite special, dear. They may not always have the time to come." Reluctantly, Lusa had to accept the truth and leave with her family. By the time they arrived at the venue, decorated personally by her father, Lusa's mood had already improved a little. Everything in sight now was a gift Rano had carefully prepared just for her. It seemed the power of a father's love was truly not something to be underestimated. Belmond, in high spirits, was even talking about building a few extra little cottages nearby. Her mother's gift wasn't quite as grand, but it was a piece of romance crafted from 99,000 red roses. In that very moment, they blazed brilliantly, the height of elegance itself. This was the philosophy her mother had always lived by. Compared to the rainbow-colored cloak from last time, this gift left Lusa even more delighted. At the same time, Aiden wheeled out a 3-tiered birthday cake. Lusa began her annual wish-making ritual. As the 3 candles were blown out, her family showered her with their warmest wishes. And her greatest wish of all was simply to have the strength to protect her family. Just then, an unexpected guest arrived at the estate. Tiulan apologized for being late, and the scene now felt utterly perfect. In truth, this was the moment the man's inner demons finally began to loosen their grip. Every night, the image of Lusa's past life appeared in his dreams. Her body buried in cold earth. The man simply couldn't believe that the beautiful girl who once could barely hold a dinner knife could have become a murderer. Because of this, he endured unbearable torment through his nightmares night after night. He longed to find the truth, to restore Inel's good name. The man returned to the land of the beasts. Facing those who had once wanted him dead, he searched desperately for a way to bring the dead back to life. Everyone looked at him as though he were a fool. No one paid the slightest attention to his request. Treated like a walking disaster, the man once again lost all sense of reason, just as before. All he wanted was to see the girl he loved just one more time. What fault was that of his? When the dream finally faded and the person was gone, Tiulan regained his senses. He looked down at the invitation card Lusa had sent him. Those sincere, heartfelt words warmed his soul in that very moment. Carrying the gift he had spent so much effort preparing, he appeared before everyone. He took his seat, introducing himself as Palin's cousin. Mischievously, Rano announced that any guest attending had to sing a song for the birthday host. Lusa was stunned. Did the Empire really have a custom like this? It really would be such a shame to let this moment pass without joining in. Before long, the birthday party was winding down. To give Tiulan more time alone with Lusa, her mother suggested the two of them take a walk around the grounds, then quickly kept the 2 nosy older brothers occupied elsewhere. This gave their beloved daughter just the opportunity she needed, and thanks to that, the bond between the two of them slowly began to warm. For the sake of her daughter's future happiness within the Beast Clan, her mother kept a firm grip on the 2 troublesome brothers who loved meddling in other people's affairs. This gave Lusa and Tiulan the chance to go on their little outing together, and as the 2 of them walked side by side through the quiet forest, the natural scent of aged wood clinging to the young man completely captured Lusa's attention. Even now, she still had no idea that the man standing before her was truly Palin himself. She only sensed that the 2 of them were remarkably alike. It was Lusa who spoke up first, sincerely thanking Tiulan for coming to celebrate her birthday with her. The worry that had been weighing on her heart finally eased, if only a little. Meanwhile, Tiulan was gripping the birthday gift tightly in his hand. Finally, when she wasn't looking, he quietly slipped it out. When Lusa received the gift, she was completely taken aback. She hadn't realized their relationship was close enough for this. Even though both of them belonged to a special species, she still felt she could never quite step into his inner world. The way he always seemed determined to keep his distance from everyone left Lusa, even now, unable to understand him at all. What kind of beast was he exactly? And on top of that, another question suddenly surfaced in her mind. Why, in that moment when everything hung by a single thread, had he called her Princess Ino? But now wasn't really the time to dwell on any of that. Right now, the most important thing for Lusa was to unwrap her birthday gift. To see what Tiulan had chosen, and sure enough, it was exactly as she expected, a piece of jewelry currently trending in high fashion. Lusa felt a rush of pure delight. But no sooner had she put it on and taken barely 2 steps than the piece of jewelry suddenly flew off and vanished. It turned out the spirits were playfully teasing Lusa. Tiulan picked the fallen gift up off the ground, then asked how her progress with the spirits was coming along. She told him she could now see them regularly. She could even communicate with them, though they were always mischievous and incredibly stubborn. Standing there, side by side, it seemed like fully mastering control over the spirits would still take her quite a bit more practice. Just as the two of them were talking, Tiulan stepped closer to Lusa and gently placed a hairpin in her hair. She was already used to having others style her hair for her, but in this particular moment, the feeling struck her as strangely unfamiliar. Just as the warmth between the two of them was beginning to build, rain suddenly poured down at the most inconvenient time imaginable. The two of them stood rooted to the spot, neither willing to be the first to leave. Lusa was still lost in the gentle warmth Tiulan had shown her moments before. The feeling this young man gave her felt more and more like Palin, the way he'd been in her past life. Whether it was his words, his gestures, or even those calm, quiet gray eyes like the surface of a still lake. Everything about him resembled the man who had once stood by her side, all those years ago. That thought alone was enough to make Lusa unable to hold back her question any longer. That day in the papal hall when you helped me hold back the rioting spirits, why did you call me Princess Ino? Hearing this, Tiulan's chest tightened as if a long-forgotten drawer of memories, buried under years of dust, had suddenly been pried open. Unable to explain himself to the girl in front of him, all he could do was apologize, hoping to cover up his strange reaction. At the same time, he begged her not to come any closer. That strange request was, fortunately, interrupted just in time by the arrival of her brother, easing the awkward, suffocating tension between them. Tiulan took the opportunity to slip away as well. And at that very moment, everyone back home was on pins and needles. No one could stop speculating about the real reason Bui Ilan had come to the birthday party. Only Bellman knew that the man's visit was tied to a past commission, one connected to proving Princess Inel's innocence. But the deeper the investigation went, the more suspicious clues kept surfacing. Even Shakai had gotten involved by this point. It seemed the truth behind the princess's death was far more complicated than anyone had assumed. The little silver fox cub possessed boundless sacred power. In her past life, it turned out, she had been branded the very culprit who murdered the emperor. After her execution, her body had been buried deep within the mountains. But now, both her coffin and the burial jewels within it had been stolen by someone unknown. Once he learned of this, the crown prince immediately dispatched men to search through the night, convinced that the sudden disappearance of the body had to be connected to the coronation ceremony coming up soon. I went through so much trouble pinning our father's death on my sister. Nothing can be allowed to go wrong now, of all times. Facing those who still harbored suspicions against him, the only way to prove his sincerity and finally put their doubts to rest was to forgive his sister's actions and have her body returned to the royal family tomb. Otherwise, if they ever discovered the body had been stolen, with the burial relics scattered into the black market, then a man who had sacrificed his own sister's life just to secure his position would end up looking like the biggest fool in the entire kingdom. The ambitious man could only hope that his sister's spirit, watching from above, would help smooth his path to the throne. At that very moment, Lusa had drifted into a dream. Guided by the spirits, she wandered through this strange, otherworldly space. Eventually, in a bright, glowing place, she came upon a coffin carved from white stone. Drawing closer, she saw a gentle-faced woman with wavy, pale golden hair. Her elegant hands, unmarked by a single callus, spoke clearly of her noble status. This was Princess Inel, the woman who had died so young in her past life. Roughly 3 years had passed since then, yet the body showed no sign of decay at all. If anything, it seemed even better preserved than before. Just as Lusa was puzzling over why she was having this dream at all, Basira suddenly appeared behind her, startling Lusa back to reality. She assumed it was simply the result of yesterday's rainstorm. From that point on, her mood remained unsettled. It was also after she brought up Inel to Tiulan that his demeanor turned as cold as ice. Thinking back to when she had still been the princess, she was certain she'd never known of any cousin like him. Nor had she ever wronged him in any way. Perhaps it was simply that she had too much on her mind. Out of sheer frustration, Lusa shifted from human form into her silver fox form. That sudden, dramatic reaction drew the attention of everyone outside the room. She had to find Belmond quickly to change her back. But for now, hiding seemed like the better option. Lusa scurried quickly under the bed, but a sudden sneeze gave her away and completely blew her cover. Fortunately, it was her mother who found her. Lusa let out a sigh of relief once Celia realized Lusa couldn't transform back into a human at the moment. She tried using magic herself, but it still didn't work. So she carried Lusa to Belmond's room instead, only to find the man wasn't there. At the same time, Shikai had also come looking for Belmond. Just as everyone was starting to grow anxious, a magic circle suddenly appeared, and a disciple of the Mage Tower Master arrived as well, also searching for Belmond. At the crack of dawn, the group had received an urgent magical distress signal sent by Belmond. Shikai suspected it was likely connected to that earlier commission. One day, the Merchant Guild leader had received an anonymous letter along with an enormous sum of money, instructing him to attend a special auction. He was to buy back the olivine crystal necklace and deliver it to a designated location. Upon learning that the item was one of Enel's personal relics, Belmond had immediately accepted the commission, and in the process, rounded up every tomb raider across the entire empire. And yet, despite it all, there still wasn't a single solid clue to be found. This whole situation might well be connected to last night's dream. Why, after all this time since her death, was something like this still happening? Could it be that someone was doing this on purpose? At this urgent moment, they all rallied together. "Hold on, Belmond, we're coming to save you." At that very moment, Belmond, badly wounded, was hiding in a dark corner. The entire temple around him was riddled with traps, all set specifically to kill whoever brought the necklace here. It was clear that only a divine beast could possibly have this kind of power. No one imagined that a commission from years ago would end up being connected to the beasts themselves after all this time. The circumstances surrounding Princess Enel's death, it seemed, were growing more fascinating by the day. The little beast, the one the beast couple had spent 10,000 years trying to bring into the world? How could anyone possibly think they could bully her so easily? At the most critical moment, her mother unleashed a surge of power unlike anything seen before. Just a short while earlier, the moment the three of them learned that Belmond was in trouble, they had rushed straight to the village where the incident occurred. But Lusa couldn't sense even the faintest trace of Belmond's presence. With no other choice, they had to ask the local villagers for information. They learned that the most suspicious place nearby was an abandoned temple, one that had collapsed in an earthquake years earlier. No one had gone there to pray since, and the village well had gradually turned as red as blood. Countless snakes had also begun appearing, and this, it seemed, was most likely where Belmond had run into trouble. The group hesitated, growing more fearful, but at that moment, Lusa was suddenly swallowed by darkness. She was pulled into an entirely different space, leaving Lusa utterly disoriented. While she stood there, uncertain whether to stay put or move, a large hand suddenly reached out from behind and grabbed hold of her. To her surprise, it was her brother Belmond, who at that very moment was dodging an attack from a swarm of snakes. But he made quick work of the threat in front of him, then turned to ask Lusa, "Why are you here?" Before her lingering confusion could even be answered, a familiar voice suddenly rang out from inside the room. The two of them crept up and peeked through the crack in the door, where to their astonishment, Palin and the Serpent Man were surrounding the princess. It turned out that Enel's body had been stolen by none other than Basira himself. Lusa's heart clenched, terrified that Palin might actually believe the man's twisted, deceitful words. And so, ignoring Belmond's attempts to stop her, she unleashed a surge of overwhelming magic from her entire body. Soaring hundreds of meters into the air, she landed before Basira like some kind of avenging angel. The sight of it left both Palin and Belmond so frightened they nearly lost control of themselves. She then turned fiercely toward Palin, gesturing wildly, desperate to warn him not to believe a single word of the Serpent Man's lies. Seeing the two of them suddenly appear, Basira showed no shock at all. Quite the opposite. He looked delighted. "It seems everyone has finally gathered here." A little beast who can only communicate through kicking people, paired with another beast covered head to toe in wounds. And now, on top of it all, this reckless, unhinged beast as well. As an elder myself, shouldn't I go ahead and teach the lot of you a proper lesson? This only made Lusa even angrier. She had no idea what Palin was scheming. But if he intended to touch her past life body, shouldn't he at least have the decency to ask her opinion first? Almost instantly, a surge of overwhelming magic burst from Lusa's body once again. Right before everyone's eyes, to her own astonishment, a brand new tail sprouted from Lusa's body. The sight terrified even her, and she immediately begged Belmond to change her back to normal at once. But the deranged serpent man chose that exact moment to launch an attack on Lusa. Unable to bear watching an innocent get hurt, Palin stepped in between them. Just as the two of them stood locked in a standoff, the ceiling suddenly cracked open with several massive fissures, and a blood-red beast descended. It was Celia, transformed into her true form. With a thud, it seemed the whole family had finally arrived. Basira now faced the prospect of a brutal battle, with the little silver fox beast striking the opening blow. The decisive showdown against the king of all beasts, Basira, had officially begun. With her mother, Celia's help added to the fight, everyone's confidence surged. After all, her mother's unmatched flame magic wasn't something just anyone could counter. Even the Serpent Man never expected the situation to take such a dramatic, earth-shaking turn. Facing an all-out strike from Celia, Basira still maintained the composed bearing of the King of Beasts. Flames engulfed his entire body instantly. Celia then moved in front of her children. She knew perfectly well that Basira wouldn't be easy to deal with. With Belmond already injured, the only thing she could do now was do everything in her power to keep her children safe. Just as Celia had suspected, Basira emerged from the flames completely unscathed. He looked at them all with disdain, declaring that attacking an elder of the Beast clan was hardly something to be proud of. Celia paid him no mind whatsoever. As a mother, it was her duty to stand by her children no matter what. So what if the man standing against her was the King of Beasts? Right in the middle of the standoff, Basira turned to remind Belmond nearby that perhaps it was time to do something. After all, the two of them hadn't come here to fight in the first place. They had come to resurrect Princess Inel. Knowing full well it would earn him the wrath of others, Belmond didn't hesitate and launched an attack on Celia for the sake of his goal. The moment the weapon capable of unleashing Celia's flame magic came crashing down, the group lost all ability to fight back. Palin moved to Basira's side and, together with the Serpent Man, carried Inel's body away, vanishing from everyone's sight. Lusa, in that moment, felt an overwhelming ache in her heart, unable to understand why the once gentle Palin would do something like this. As the two of them left, the temple began to collapse, and the group had no choice but to use a teleportation gate to escape. The village had already been consumed by a raging fire. It seemed the battle moments earlier had sent flames spilling out beyond the temple itself. Ordinary magic was powerless to put out a fire born from a beast's power. Even Tower Master Belmond found himself at a complete loss, let alone Lusa, who was already injured. As for the disaster, the villagers mistakenly believed it was the wrath of a divine beast, and began kneeling down to pray. This left Celia deeply embarrassed. Breaking into a cold sweat, she hid her face in shame in a corner. Belmond had no choice but to summon every last bit of his strength to cast a massive-scale spell to bring the crisis under control, but in doing so, his own body suffered heavy injuries as well. Just as the group was about to leave, the villagers caught sight of Lusa's two tails. Believing it to be a divine manifestation of the beast spirit, they began bowing and paying homage to Lusa. Surrounded and worshipped by the villagers, when in truth, the one who had accidentally started the fire was her mother Celia, and the one who had put it out was her brother Belmond. By the time the four of them finally made it home, they collapsed onto the floor, utterly exhausted. As they began reflecting on everything that had happened that day, the most shocking part of all was undoubtedly Palin's sudden appearance. He had ended up standing on the same side as Basira. After learning the whole story, her father couldn't help but marvel at how things had unfolded. He never imagined that returning a single necklace could lead to so many unexpected twists and turns. That afternoon, Rano brought the princess's emerald necklace to the palace, and while there, he even took the opportunity to needle the crown prince a little. He asked if there was any other piece of jewelry he needed help tracking down. The question struck a nerve, and the crown prince's face went pale with fear. He hastily snatched the princess's relic away, muttered a thinly veiled threat, and stormed off. He was clearly afraid Rano would expose even more of his secrets. After all, Rano had already gathered plenty of clues by this point. Basira had thrown the princess's necklace into the abandoned temple for one purpose alone, to lure Palin there. He knew that the moment Palin got hold of any clue about the necklace, he would inevitably follow the trail straight to that exact location. But the real question that remained was just what Basira intended to do with the princess's body in the first place. After all, that man only ever did things purely on a whim. It was only in moments like these that he ever truly felt alive. As long as things stayed interesting, he was willing to take on any risk at all. This certainly looked like a long, complicated problem to unravel. Watching her father suddenly lost in worry, Lusa decided to lend a hand. At that moment, Rano felt something soft and furry nuzzle against his chin. Opening his eyes, he found Lusa right beside him, unexpectedly nuzzling and patting his handsome face. The man's mood instantly brightened, and he announced to everyone that tonight he would go out and find something delicious to eat. While he was at it, he figured it would help ease his frayed nerves as well. A few days later, Lusa woke up just like any other day. Her family had been waiting for quite a while already, which struck Lusa as rather odd. Was today some kind of special occasion? The two of them had come down for breakfast right on time, even taking unusually careful notice of her. Afterward, everyone gathered to discuss something important. They were preparing to rebuild the temple that her mother had accidentally burned down. The villagers were all saying it was thanks to the blessing of the sacred little silver fox. They even wanted to erect a statue of the little silver fox in front of the temple. But if they dared to make anything too outrageous, Bellman made it clear he wouldn't let them off easily. Lusa felt utterly mortified. She couldn't even bear to imagine such a scene. If they really wanted to build a statue, shouldn't it at least be one honoring her father instead? What was the point of a statue depicting someone as frail and small as her? Besides, she felt she had some say in the matter too, after all. Shouldn't they at least ask for her opinion first, even just as a formality? Seeing everyone chatting so animatedly, her father wanted to join in the conversation too. Feeling a little put out, Lusa nuzzled into her father's arms. Rano decided to give Lusa a necklace, though not one he had chosen to give her personally, but rather one from the honored guest sitting before them. It was Aris, head of the Merchant Guild, the very man who had accepted the Crown Prince's commission. That had led Belmont and everyone else astray into the temple, setting off everything that followed. To calm the Duke's fury, the guild leader agreed to offer up a necklace as a peace gesture. But what Rano wanted wasn't just that. He demanded the man join his own faction, and in return promised to grant him a noble title. As for Rano's offer, the guild leader ultimately turned it down. He didn't dare place himself against the royal family. After all, he had a family of his own that he needed to protect. To express his regret over declining, the guild leader offered up a piece of useful information instead, that the Papal Hall had been involved in Princess Inel's death. It seemed the truth behind her death in her past life was far from as simple as she had once imagined.